and welcome to In Depth. I'm Tina Jha. China celebrated its 70th anniversary of the communist rule on 1st October 2019. A massive military parade, the largest in modern Chinese history, was held in the heart of the power center, the Tiananmen Square in Beijing. Seen as a display of China's military might, the parade showcased the country's most advanced weaponry, including ballistic missiles as well as warplanes. Addressing the country on its National Day, President Xi Jinping emphasized on unity, development and strength. He praised the remarkable achievements made by the Chinese people in the past 70 years and said, absolute poverty, a problem that had plagued the nation for thousands of years, was coming to an end. President Xi also spoke of the significant transformation that China has witnessed in the last 7 decades, asserting that no power can stop the progress of the country. Today's In Depth takes a look at the history of China's formation, the significant changes the country has seen in the past 70 years, and how it has gone from being one of the weakest economies in the world to one of its strongest today. So China celebrated its growing power with a massive display of military hardware in Beijing. The celebrations were overseen by President Xi Jinping, who pledged peaceful development on the 70th birthday of Communist China. On its National Day, the world also got a glimpse of China's most advanced defense technology. The event is the country's most important day of the year as it looks to project its assurance in the face of mounting challenges.
China hosted lavish events on October 1st to mark the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. On the same day in 1949, Mao Zedong, or Chairman Mao, announced the formation of the PRC after communist forces won a bloody civil war. Modern China has since developed at an extraordinary pace but has acquired a reputation as one of the world's most restrictive states. Official ceremonies started with President Xi Jinping paying his respects to Mao Zedong in Beijing. Dressed in a slate grey Mao suit, Xi was accompanied by his predecessors Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin. Amid 70 gun salutes, the National Flag Guards escorted a 5-starred red flag marching from the monument to the People's Heroes towards the National Flag Post in the northern part of Tiananmen Square. While the flag was being hoisted, all those present at the ceremony scene sang loudly as a military band played the national anthem. The Chinese president also addressed the audience.
同心同德，艰苦奋斗，取得了令世界刮目相看的伟大成就。今天，社会主义中国巍然屹立在世界东方，没有任何力量能够撼动我们伟大祖国的地位。
The main event of the day was the largest parade held by the Chinese military. To mark the day, the country organized massive military parade showcasing its most advanced weapons, including nuclear and hypersonic missiles. Foot formations featuring servicewomen and peacekeepers marched through Tiananmen Square as part of the military parade. Around 15,000 military personnel, 580 pieces of military equipment and 160 aircraft made an appearance at the parade. The nation's newest military technology was on full display. Military tanks, helicopters, and even the DF-41, China's new intercontinental ballistic missile, was spotted. An echelon of planes in a 70 formation held a flypast. The military parade was also followed by 1 lakh civilian performers on floats, from farmers and teachers to doctors and students. Later, hailing the remarkable achievements made by the Chinese people in the past 70 years, President Xi said absolute poverty, a problem that has plagued the Chinese nation for thousands of years, was coming to an end.
我们要坚持和平发展道路，奉行互利共赢的开放战略，继续同世界各国人民一道，推动共建人类命运共同体。
The events that were open to officials, select members and invited foreign dignitaries only was also watched by hundreds of millions of people around the country. Security was tightened in central Beijing for weeks, with strict controls on flying kites or drones around the parade area. Even racing pigeons were banned.
The message China gives National Parade is very simple. China has now arrived. It is now a major power in the world. Whether it's militarily, whether it's economically, whether it's scientifically, China is right there at the top. This is the image that the Chinese National Parade and all the activities leading up to it are a sign of.
The celebrations come at a time when the country is facing serious political and economic challenges. While China is grappling with its economic slowdown, it is also waging a grim trade war with the United States. Both countries have slapped additional tariffs on each other's export goods. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
For any country, significant anniversaries mark not only the passage of time, but also offer an opportunity to recall past triumphs and honor past losses, helping nations to reassess their past and rethink their future. That is exactly what China needs to do. For despite its economic successes, there are many areas that the country needs to work upon and several challenges that it must overcome.
In the 70 years since its formation, China has never looked as strong as it does today. The 4-decade economic boom ushered in by the country's late leader Deng Xiaoping's free market reforms and opening up policy has transformed the country completely. In the last 40 years, China has witnessed something of an economic miracle, growing annually at an average of 9.5%. Life expectancy too has risen from 66 years in 1979 to 76 in 2016.
What they say now is that it is economic system, Chinese system, it's capitalism with Chinese characteristics. So there is politically, it is a closed system, it is a closed environment, but economically, in terms of economics, there is full freedom to invest and there is full freedom, it's a capitalist system. So it can grow and it can develop, and that is what has helped it, that there are no political freedoms, there is no freedom of expression, freedom of press. That is very, very strongly, seriously curtailed and contained. But as far as economics is concerned, there is independence, there is liberty. There can be foreign investment that can come in, and there, as a result of that, it has continued to grow. And of course, when it became a member of the World Trade Organization, then it has, after that, it has continued to grow for the last 17, 18 years.
There is no doubt that China's economic influence is massive. However, the country is still neither an advanced nor a developed one. It is, in fact, a developing giant on the world stage. To become the superpower that China aspires to be, it must wield global influence in varied spheres, including economics, science and technology, military matters, and soft power. As far as economics is concerned, there is no denying that China is near the top, with its largest manufacturing hub and export of mechanized goods. Its military too is a strong one, with People's Liberation Army being the world's largest serviced army. But in the other subjects, including science and technology, China's report card is less impressive. Another area that China seems to be struggling in is soft power. Soft power essentially means how countries leverage their international image to earn the respect and support of other countries. China ranks either low or very low in a host of other areas as well, for example, environment. Since 2012, the country has been the world's largest emitter of carbon dioxide according to the International Energy Agency. China ranks 72nd for globalization, 79th for corruption, 87th for gender equality, 90th in human development, 100th in life expectancy, and 110th in economic freedom. It ranks even lower in areas related to politics and human rights. For example, China was 135th out of 162 countries in the 2018 Human Freedom Index, 177th out of 180 in the Press Freedom Index, and at the rock bottom for the third consecutive year for internet freedom, according to New York-based Freedom House in 2017. Though it needs to stop the slide in its economy, China's woes are not limited to growth figures. It needs to address wide social contradictions that exist. In 1980, the richest 1% of the people owned 6.4% of the country's wealth. In 2015, that figure was 13.9%. In 1980, the poorest half of the population held 26% of the wealth. Now they hold just 14.8%. In politics, the country seems even more divided than ever before. There has been widespread disapproval of the Mao-style personality cult surrounding President Xi Jinping and the controversial constitutional amendment entitling him to lifelong rule.
China faces a big challenge. Till now, it has grown on the basis of the fact that the Western economies, like the United States and Europe, allowed it to export because it helped them keep their prices down. So it allowed Chinese exports to go up a lot. So they pushed out their dirty industry, their polluting industry, or where labor costs were high to China. China took advantage of it. Others could have done it, they did not. China became successful at it. Now China has reached a stage where Chinese growth cannot depend on exports alone. They have to shift to domestic consumption. To shift to domestic consumption, they'll have to change their internal politics and economic structures. That is a very big problem. If they try to shift from exports to domestic-led growth, you can have structural problems in the economy. The Chinese political system is out of date. It's a top-down authoritarian model. In this day and age, the amount of money the Chinese have to spend on keeping the people under control, the Chinese internal security costs are higher than the external security cost. So Chinese government to retain power has to spend lots and lots of money to keep the people under control. That is very inefficient.
The mass protests in Hong Kong, rising pro-independence sentiment in Taiwan, and the way China deals with Uyghur Muslims, these are other issues that threaten to derail the country. For more than 3 months, Hong Kongers have been protesting, first against an extradition law that would have allowed suspects to be sent to mainland China for trial, and now calling for greater democracy. Over in Taiwan, cross-strait relations are at a historic low, with pro-independence voices gaining ground. Beijing views Taiwan as a wayward province that must be reunited with the mainland at any cost, even through force if necessary. Also, Beijing's relationship with the West, in particular Washington, are at their lowest. A full-blown tariff war looms amid escalating rivalry and confrontation between the two. Meanwhile, the Uyghur community is seeking global attention to what it calls is the Holocaust of the 21st century. The Muslim minority claims they are being arbitrarily arrested and imprisoned. Even the use of Uyghur and other local languages is being eliminated from schools, which enforce full Chinese language teaching. Thus, after 70 years of its formation, while the economic successes of the past 40 years cannot be ignored, China has a long way to go as far as politics and human indices go. From here on, the country's continued success will depend on its willingness to embrace modernity in governance, democracy, freedom and the rule of law. With inputs from Vipul Agarwal, Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
In 1949, when the Communist Party came to power, China was a very poor country. According to the country's National Bureau of Statistics, the size of its economy in 1952 was around 119 yuan per person, equivalent to $54 at that time. During the same time, GDP per capita in the United States of America was $2,349, 44 times than that of China. But by 2018, that gap had narrowed considerably. The US now has a GDP per capita which is 6.4 times larger than that of China, which is the world's second biggest economy after the US and growing at roughly twice the pace. In our next report, let's look at the economic achievements of China over the past 70 years.
In the 7 decades since its formation, the People's Republic of China has gone from being one of the weakest economies in the world to one of the strongest. In the 1960s, gross domestic product per capita in China lagged behind not just high-income countries, but also nations like Cambodia, Kenya and Sierra Leone. By the end of 2018, GDP per capita in China rose to $9,732 from around $54 in 1952, a 180-fold increase. Consultancy firm PricewaterhouseCoopers says China is the world's second largest economy after the United States and will be the top one by 2030. In terms of global GDP, China's economy now makes up 16% of the world total, from a mere 1.8% in 1952. Although China still ranks 80th in the world in terms of GDP per capita, and is far behind the US, which is 6.4 times higher, the gap has narrowed significantly in the past few decades.
It has also been able to, how China was a very poor country like India in terms of economic development and growth, but it has been able to make its manufacturing competitive and become the manufacturing hub, become the factory of the world. So India also needs to do that, because currently we have just about 17% of our workforce, 17% of the GDP that is contributed by manufacturing. We need to increase that to at least 25%, because if we want to provide jobs to our people, then manufacturing is the only way. While in our case, much of the GDP component is from the area of services. Services are good, they are clean, but they don't provide so many jobs. So in that sense, how to use the manufacturing prowess, how to have greater competitiveness in our manufacturing system to provide more jobs to the people, that is something that we can definitely learn from China.
China has gone from being a predominantly agricultural economy to the world's factory and beyond, with 27% global manufacturing value added. In 1952, a large part of China's population struggled to feed themselves and starvation was common. At that time, the agricultural value added accounted for 50.5% of the country's GDP, with farmers making up 83.5% of the workforce. Transformation took place massively between 1978 to 2018. Agriculture as a share of GDP plunged to 7.2% by the end of 2018. As a proportion of the workforce, agriculture made up just 26.1% compared to 27.6% for the industrial sector and 46.3% for the services sector. According to the World Bank, China's manufacturing value added had become the largest in the world by the year 2010, and by 2017 accounted for 27% of the global total.
There are many things in China that we can learn from, many things. Overall, it cannot be a growth model for us, yes, but there are many features of it. The fact that they're able to liberalize their markets, internal markets in terms of labor, that has led to productivity increases. The fact that the Chinese have invested very heavily in the school system, in the scientific systems, means not only are Chinese all educated and literate, but the scientists are among the best in the world. Their contribution to the field of science and technology is amazing. Also, in terms of social indicators like education, health, all aspects of it, the Chinese have built up a very successful model where the service provider at the local level is responsible to the local community. And therefore, the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese government officials, if they have to rise, they rise to merit only. So, lots from the Chinese example that we can learn.
Another characteristic that has marked China's economic rise is the growth of private firms. The country had no private enterprise when it began its economic reforms in 1978. But by the end of 2018, private companies were contributing more than half of the national tax revenue, making up more than 60% of the GDP, fixed asset investment and outbound direct investment, and generating over 80% of urban jobs. In 2018, China's R&D expenditure reached 2.18% of GDP or 1.97 trillion yuan, which is about 280 billion US dollars, exceeding that of the European Union. According to the latest Global Innovation Index, China's R&D spending is the second largest in the world and contributed to 31% of global spending in 2017. This has helped to accumulate a large pool of knowledge and technical know-how necessary to upgrade China's economic development. The Chinese standard of living has also improved dramatically, especially in healthcare, education and housing. The average life expectancy, which was only 35 when the People's Republic was established, has improved to 77. Infant mortality rate has dropped from 200 per thousand to 6.1 per thousand in the same period. Illiteracy rate has also dramatically improved from 80% to 5%. Urbanization has risen significantly in China in the last few decades, from 10.9% in 1952 to 17.9% in 1978 and accelerated to nearly 60% at the end of 2018. The International Monetary Fund says that despite intensified trade tensions with the United States and economic growth slowing to just over 6%, the Asian giant is on track to become the world's largest economy by 2030. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And let's now talk about China's history. Between eras of multiple kingdoms and warlordism, Chinese dynasties have ruled parts or all of China since its prehistoric days. China is one of the world's 4 ancient civilizations, and the written history of China dates back to the Shang dynasty over 3,000 years ago. Here's a look back at the dynasties that have formed today's China.
China has written records dating back to 4,000 years. This alone makes it one of the 4 great ancient civilizations of the world. Going back in time, prehistoric China's chronology is divided into the Paleolithic Age, the Neolithic Age and the Bronze Age. The Xia dynasty of China, or early Bronze Age China, is possibly the first dynasty in ancient China. Xia dynasty consisted of several clans living alongside the Yellow River. The Shang dynasty was the first to have historical records. Many bronze objects and jade articles that date back to 1600 BC support these early archaeological records. After the Shang era, the larger Zhou era territory was divided by a network of feudal states and was ruled by kings. The Zhou dynasty introduced the concept of the mandate of heaven to justify their rule. The central Zhou government began to weaken due to external and internal pressures in the 8th century BC, and the country eventually splintered into smaller states. In 221 BC, Qin Shi Huang conquered the various warring states and adopted the title of Huangdi, or Emperor of the Qin, marking the beginning of Imperial China. The oppressive government fell soon after his death and was supplanted by the Han dynasty. Successive dynasties developed bureaucratic systems that enabled the emperor to control vast territories directly. In the 21 centuries, from 206 BC until AD 1912, a special elite of scholar officials handled routine administrative tasks. Young men well versed in calligraphy, history, literature, and philosophy were carefully selected through difficult government examinations. China's last dynasty was the Qing, that was replaced by the Republic of China in 1912 and in the mainland by the People's Republic of China in 1949, resulting in two de facto states claiming to be the legitimate government of all China. Chinese history has alternated between political unity and peace, war and failed statehood, the most recent being the Chinese Civil War. It was on October 1, 1949 that Chinese Communist leader Mao Zedong declared the creation of the People's Republic of China, or the PRC. The announcement ended the costly civil war between the Chinese Communist Party and the Nationalist Party, or the Kuomintang, that broke out after World War II and was preceded by conflict since the 1920s. The People's Republic of China completed the governmental upheaval in China begun by the Chinese Revolution of 1911. The fall of mainland China to communism in 1949 led the United States to suspend diplomatic ties with the PRC for decades.
His motto also was let 100 flowers bloom and let 100 thoughts flourish. So he did make this motto, but they were never really able to implement that. And during his term also there was a cultural revolution which resulted in a lot of bloodshed and violence, and the country had to suffer greatly. It is only subsequently in the 70s that when Deng Xiaoping, the other iconic leader, came to the fore, then they started opening up the economy. And it is a result of the reforms that were introduced by Deng Xiaoping that the country has been able to progress so far.
At present, China has 33 administrative units directly under the central government. These consist of 22 provinces, 5 autonomous regions, 4 municipalities and 2 special administrative regions. The island province of Taiwan has been under separate administration since 1949. Beijing, the capital of the People's Republic, is also the cultural, economic and communications center of the country. Shanghai is the main industrial city, whereas Hong Kong is the leading commercial center and port. Between eras of multiple kingdoms and warlordism, Chinese dynasties have ruled parts or all of China and sometimes as far as Xinjiang and Tibet as at present. Traditional culture and influences from Asia and the Western world, carried by waves of immigration, cultural assimilation, expansion and foreign contact, form the basis of the modern culture of China. With inputs from Vipul Agarwal, Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
So that's it from us on the show today. We'll be back same time tomorrow with a focus on some other significant subject. In case you missed the television broadcast of the program, you can also watch it online on YouTube and Twitter. You can also send in your suggestions and feedback about the program. Thank you for watching.